What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Rideshare Rodeo, gig economy news and interviews, sponsored by Para and ParaWorks. I'm your host, SJ. It's time to get it on.
Well, midnight headlight, blinded on a rainy night, Steve laid up ahead, slow me down and making no time. I gotta keep it rolling. Those are windshield wipers slapping out the tempo, baby, put the rhythm with the song on the radio. I gotta keep it rolling. I'm driving my life away.
Welcome, everybody, to the 250th episode of the Rideshare Rodeo audio podcast. What's happening, y'all? How you doing? So, a quarter of a way to 1,000 episodes. Pretty good, man. Pretty good. Before we get into the stories this week, and this, you guys, I know that for those of you new to the Finding the Audio podcast, I know we've had a lot of new listeners too lately, and I've been getting more emails than normal, which I love. So don't take that the wrong way, you guys. If you ever have a question, so let me just do this because I haven't done it in a while, and it's episode 250. If you're a new listener, always feel free to email me about any questions that you have during an episode, or you can leave them. The problem with leaving them in a pod player that you prefer, like if you, let's say, let me take a more random or kind of randomish one, like if you like, I don't even know if you like. I know Stitcher's going away. A perfect example. If you like to use Stitcher to listen to podcasts and you make a comment in Stitcher, I necessarily won't see that because there's 300 plus audio podcast players, probably 500 plus in this country or in the world, and we're on all of them. So I don't see the comments that way. So I always put my email out there, steve@ridesharerodeo.com, and never is it a bother. You can ask me any question you want, and I always get back to you. Just, realize, give me a minute. It might not be the, same day, but I will get back to you. I always try and do it before the next podcast. Now, again, this is where I get into it. For those of you new, this is the Tuesday podcast. This is the baby. This is the one that was first. This is the first thing that ever came about with the audio podcast. I do drop a Friday one. We bring over the roundtable that we do on Thursday nights to this audio podcast. So there's a Tuesday drop, and then there's a Friday drop. That's our Thursday night roundtable on audio format, where I clean up the audio a little bit and bring it over to you guys here because it's a roundtable and it's a different type of discussion. So both those drop on this podcast, but the Tuesday one is the OG one. I have CEOs on. I sometimes am alone. Sometimes I might have one person. Sometimes, who knows? I might have legislatures. I might have running politicians. I might have union delegates. I might have anti-app people or pro-app people. I love having drivers from around the country. So if you want to email me because you listen sometimes and you're like, I could speak about my market. I am going back to a piece that I used to do on the audio podcast about a year and a half ago. And I really don't remember why it died out. I think it was because I was doing more on YouTube. So it would have been another guest I had to book. But all it is a 15 to 20 minute segment on this Tuesday podcast where I bring you on and you just kind of tell us a little bit about your market, what apps you work, what markets you work in. And, from there, I let you kind of have at it. And we just have a 15-minute discussion about, like how are you earning, and anything you want to talk about. If you want to stay away from earnings, obviously I might ask, but it's more like, what do you want to tell us about your gig experience? And I think to be honest, it helps people too, even if they're not in your market. Because when we were doing that before, I was getting emails from people saying that, those segments really helped me because I haven't had like the person, I remember one email, the person had not, nobody from their market, which is a smaller rural market, had ever been on the podcast. So that was why they did it and said, oh, that person's from my market. I really like that you do this. It was actually the opposite. It was somebody from a rural market who was getting perspective from hearing the other guests that I have on from larger cities and whatnot, and thinking, wow, they make a lot more than me. But of course, I always bring it around and say, yeah, but for those of you in the rural areas, don't forget you pay 1/4 what we pay to live in these big, crazy overpriced cities. So, you got to scale. I think you got to scale your earnings. That's why it's never a black and white game here. It's never, this is what you do. And if anybody ever is telling you this is what you do, like tips and tricks, I'm okay with some tips and tricks. If they can help you, great. But if anybody's ever saying like, hey, you have to do this, I would look, unless they're in your market, and even then I would take it with a grain of salt. But unless they're in your market, that really doesn't mean anything, because in your market, only Now you might be new or you might be new to a platform or whatnot, and you want to search out some information. That's how I like to provide it, because I know how I've talked to enough of you guys. I know how much different each market is. That's why I always say market to market. But if any of you are interested, again, Steve at ridesharerodeo.com. And while I'm plugging things here, since it's the 250th episode, before we jump in, just one quick thing and then one more thing about what's coming up. So this and the month of August, you can still become a Patreon member for $5 a month. And if you do, you get tons of you're going to get tons of content that isn't on any other platform. And if you like listening to the podcast, there's a surprise coming up. I'm going to start recording this audio podcast on Mondays in the Patreon studio, only available to Patreon members. And if you're thinking, well, I can just wait till Tuesday to hear it. One thing that will be different, though, is if you're a Patreon member, I will stick around after the podcast and do a Q&A with you guys. So if you want to be in there, that's something I've never done, and we can do a Q&A on the stories I talked about that week. If it's anything else, we can see what kind of time we got, but it's more about like if you have any questions on that, and that will be for Patreon members only. But again, I try and keep everything so that, on some platform at some point you're going to be able to find it. But I am creating a couple things for Patreon only. But, just if you want to go over there and take a look at what we got, support. What I would say, though, is if you are interested, do it before end of August, because I am going to raise the price up on the Patreon because a lot more things are going to be coming out on there, like some curry ride-alongs and some dumpling info and things like that, some other off-brand apps, and some Paraworks stuff too. And there will be Paraworks stuff coming out, obviously, on the audio podcast, on YouTube, on all the channels, ridesharerodeo.com, where all the news comes from, and all of this. So you will find it everywhere, but I'm going to be doing some extra stuff. Just stick with me and check it out if you want, but the price will be going up. If you get in before the end of August at $5 a month, you will be locked in at $5 a month for life, or for as long as you stay with it. So, I'm letting you guys know it's August 1st. Happy August. Let's, the other big thing that I have before I get into these news stories is that this weekend is the big one, guys. I have been crazy busy the last 3 weeks. I got to tell you guys, I have barely slept at all. Putting this event together has been crazy. But let me start with the other event, because it's a whole weekend of stuff, you guys. So, okay. So Friday, this weekend, Friday, August 4th through Sunday, August 6th, Descend on Denver. What does that mean, Steve? Come on. Okay. So Friday, August 4th is GigCon. GigCon is being held here in Denver. If you have not registered, you can still register for GigCon through gigworkerconference.com, or at least you can get all the information there. I don't even know if Pedro needs you registering at this point. I mean, we're just days out, but all the information that you would need about GigCon is right there. Go to gigworkerconference.com, and that's Friday's event, and I believe the time is 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So check that out. And of course, on Saturday, the Para Rodeo Town Hall, Saturday, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, featuring Colorado House Representative Stephanie Vigel. And the two events, the town hall will be held at Wash Park Grill. I will put an Eventbrite link if you guys are interested in coming to the Saturday town hall into the show notes. And you guys can, so look in the notes and you guys can click that and see exactly what the event is about. It is about, I don't want to bore you by saying this. This is not C-SPAN, but it is about the future of the gig economy in terms of arming our politicians and making sure they have the right information to represent us. Because here's the thing, guys, you know I'm not a fan of legislation. I'm not a fan of unions. And don't worry, the second one, I'm not going to surprise you and scare you here. I'm still not a fan of unions, and that's why I'm very involved, because here's the thing. Legislation is coming in all states. Legislation is coming, and my goal is to get very involved, which I already am, and try and make it some kind of happy medium meeting place. But I also have my guard on to be watching for any language in any of the state's bills that suggest unionizing, because it doesn't need to be in there for it to still be suggested down the road. But if it's already in there from day one, that will worry me. But let's get back to the event. So this event will be like anything else you guys, or like nothing you guys have ever seen. We'll be having some food. Wash Park Grill, 12 to 2, and then from 2 to 3:30, we will have a meet and greet. You can meet Stephanie, our House Representative. You can meet some of the other players that are coming for the town hall. You can come and speak at the town hall, or you can come after for the meet and greet. You can meet CEOs of companies. We're going to have David from Para. We're going to have Curry there. Dumplings represented. Trying to think who else. Obviously, and then a lot of the people who are going to GigCon, the Gary Middletons, GaryZapps.com, the Gig Wars team. There's going to be lots of people there you can have conversations with who are going to be involved in the town hall. And then afterwards, we're all just going to be, and it's a nice old Denver bar. So if you want to have a drink, we can have a drink. David from Paris said, if you find him, I'll make sure you do. Come find me. I'll make sure you find him. If you find him, he said he'd buy you a drink. So come on down. But yeah, anyway, let's jump forward. Again, the Eventbrite link to sign up will be in the show notes of wherever you are listening to this. And if you have any questions, guys, steve@ridesharerodeo.com. Okay. I never take this long doing those kind of intros, guys. Normally, we just jump right into the stories and interviews. But this is the 250th episode. I hadn't done this plug in a while. I thought that I really needed to remind people it's okay to email me and all that. So, what's the, when I usually try and make the first story either the first or second biggest story that I'm going to be doing that day, and then I put another story in it after it, and then I usually try and make the third story the first or second, the opposite one, the first or second biggest story, I think, that day. That's not how I have today laid out. I don't have a second biggest story because there's just a few that we need to talk about, but I do have a biggest story for sure. So if you guys noticed last week, excuse me, I had to take a drink. If you caught the news last week, it happened on Friday. There was finally a decision made in the autonomous Uber death in Phoenix in 2018. Now, even if you don't do rideshare, this story should be of major interest to you. And again, guys, I'll put this link in the show notes as well. I won't be putting every story's link, but guess what, guys? If you want to, the stories I talk about on the Rideshare Rodeo here, if you want to go read about them, they're all at ridesharerodeo.com. If you go to ridesharerodeo.com, you will see every story and then tons more. I don't get to even all of them. I pick the ones that I think flow with the podcast and that week and what's going on in the gig world. And those are the ones I run with. But if I were to do all that I posted in a week, this would be a 7-hour podcast a week every Tuesday. But this one is definitely one of the biggest. So Uber's fatal self-driving car crash is over after 5 years of running through the court system and whatnot. The self-driving car crash is over. And after the 5 years, Rafaela Vasquez, the operator of a self-driving Uber that killed a pedestrian in 2018, pleaded guilty to endangerment. Now, I want to tell you guys a few things because we've been following this story, or I have, on the website since it happened. And we've been talking about it on the roundtable. We probably talked about it 2 or 3 times on the roundtable over the past year because we knew that this June they were going to be getting into this. This happened in Maricopa County, which is Phoenix, Tempe, Arizona, and it's obviously the largest population and largest county in Arizona. Most people in Tempe or in Phoenix, and it's also just very limited where these Waymos and autonomouses go now and were going then. It's not like they're everywhere. They have specific areas and roads they can travel on, but people over the years have been known to stand on overpasses and drop rocks on these things or cinder blocks. And it seems like really a lot of that came about after that death in 2018. So they moved the court case to the adjacent county thinking that they wouldn't get a fair trial. But I happen to believe, well, you already proved we're not going to get a fair trial because look, if you're already reading between the lines, Uber paid to get that out of Maricopa County. You know, who'd they pay? I don't know. I'm not going to accuse anything, but you can't, they paid to get it out of Maricopa County because they didn't think they'd get a fair trial. What I would say to that is, what's a fair trial? You did it in Maricopa County. You killed a Maricopa County citizen, or your vehicle did. And if it wasn't a corporation, if it was just somebody in their car, not a chance you could get that moved out of your county. But let's get into this. So it's been 5 years now since since a self-driving car struck and killed a woman named Elena Hesberg as she walked her bicycle across a road in Tempe. Now, some of the details are missing here. It was a unlit street, more of a county road. It wasn't like downtown where there's tons of lighting. And as we know, the LiDAR fails in snow, in heavy rain, in the dark. It doesn't do real good. So first of all, for those that are new, autonomouses do not work. This is becoming a more and more proven fact. In fact, right now in San Francisco, I can prove to you guys how much a autonomous does not work. If you have a traffic cone, if you just have an orange traffic cone, and you see one of those cruise vehicles going around at night, go put it on its hood. If you put a traffic cone on the hood of an autonomous car, it won't move. So cone beats autonomous. But that said, her death instantly turned what had been a conundrum into a glaring, real legal one. Because here, and this has been my question for a while, who gets blamed for a road fatality in the awkward era of self-driving car testing? You know, like When humans are essentially babysitters and, and just sitting in there, still learning AI systems, is the company with the car in fault, or the person behind the wheel who should have intervened? And this is why it gets a little complicated, because I've even heard people who I know agree with me on a lot of things, and normally we'd see eye to eye on this kind of stuff, who, we just all have a different take on this. But I'll just give you guys the facts. So she was accused of a bunch of things. We all know that Uber's really good at slinging some bad PR, and that's what they did. First of all, some of the best bad PR they did was delaying this for 5 years. Now, the driver, Rafaela Vasquez, can you imagine what her last 5 years have been like? I mean, she was working as an independent contractor for a basic pay. She wasn't being paid that well. I won't get into that part. It took me a while to find out what she was being paid, but it was just kind of like gig work. I mean, you're just being paid, for time. And by doing so, she didn't have any protections. Like me, I'm okay doing gig work, but I would never get into a Uber autonomous and, make some minimal amount of money and know that I'd be responsible. So I question a lot of things. Did she know she'd be to what level she'd be responsible? How deep did they give her the training? They used to have two people in every car, and then they moved one out and just had it be one. They had already had people quitting, and it came out in this testimonial that people had been quitting because they're saying, no, dude, it's too monotonous, because they can't ride every street. They just kind of do like a bus. They're just doing circles. And not only that, you're not driving, so it gets very boring. Uber allows you to have your phone in the car. To me, that was a big part of the trial that came out, your personal phone, because you're going to have a display, which is contact with Uber. You have a phone from Uber, and you have a way to manually stop the car if you need to. So you're supposed to be watching the road, this screen, and then the Uber phone they give you is just hooked up to Slack. And if any of you are familiar with Slack, it's a business communication model. So if she were to type something in on Slack, it would go to all the different engineering teams watching this autonomous car at the same time, and then they continue a conversation on Slack. So she had that phone, but then they allow you to bring a personal phone. I thought that was very interesting, because allowing you to bring a personal phone nobody in this world doesn't understand that that's going to, obviously you're creating a distraction and allowing it in an era where these autonomouses already don't work, and I know they did it because here's why they probably did it, was because people were getting so bored they couldn't do an 8-hour shift. But here was the deal on it. You can listen to your music, you can do this, but you got to keep it over here. And they had a little rack or a little mount. So you could listen to music or podcasts or anything like that to off your phone, but you weren't supposed to touch it. So the claims have always been that she was watching the view. Now, in court, it came out that she was listening to the view, and that her phone was properly placed on the dashboard stand that Uber provided for your personal phone while listening to things. So they had made it sound like all the pictures that you see of her looking at a phone, that the way, how they twist things. The way they twisted that was they said she was watching the voice. No, the voice was on the dashboard. She's looking in the center, towards the center console area, and she's looking at a phone, but that's the Slack phone from Uber. So she was listening to the view, or to the voice, the view. My thing is, I don't know why they allow the phone. I understand it might get boring, but if clearly, again, another point that Uber knows their technology does not work, because if you're allowed to, if they need you to be in there and be paying attention, they know it's not working. You know what I mean? And if you need to be doing Slack and all this with the engineering team, I don't, again, I go back to, I don't know why, even though it's probably not their favorite thing to do in 110-degree heat in Phoenix, but I believe it should be an engineer in the car who is a W-2 salaried employee for Uber or Waymo Technologies, which is what it would have been, but make one of their engineers be in the car. Because then you're showing me that, okay, you know, I can deal with that, because if you kill somebody, you know it's on you. So, you know, it's, that still doesn't make it okay, but I feel like they maybe kind of took advantage of somebody here. But she pleaded guilty because the plea deal saves all parties from trial's uncertainties. So if a trial had found Vasquez guilty of the original felony she was charged with, negligent homicide, she would have faced 4 to 8 years in state prison. But the settlement also leaves unresolved claims made in legal filings, that she was not as off task as prosecutors claimed. The case accused her of watching the talent show The Voice on her personal cell at the same time as the crash, but she claims it was on the dashboard, and instead she was monitoring the company Slack on the handset she used for work. As for Uber, the plea saves the company from another embarrassing airing of its self-driving program shortcomings, already highlighted in a very lengthy investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. So in the filings in court, Vasquez's attorney cited that the NTSB's filings against Uber, the car failed to identify Herzberg, she was the one who was killed, as a pedestrian, and so failed to apply its brakes. The NTSB also found that Uber kept an inadequate safety culture, and that's a quote, in quote unquote inadequate safety culture, doing little to protect test operators, Vasquez in this case, from well-known phenomenon of quote unquote automation complacency. Automation complacency is where humans tend to direct less attention to automatic process that demand little input. Meaning, if you're put into a job and you're like, yeah, this does everything, but just keep an eye on it, you're much more likely to doze off, fall asleep, not pay as much of attention, get bored extremely quickly. Just everything. And they acknowledged this in the report. Uber had removed a requirement for there to be 2 test pilots in each car, which operators told, which the operators all told them, had kept them more alert and to the company's no cell phone policy. So again, now we hear about the company's no cell phone policy, but at the same time, they mentioned that she's allowed to be listening to music or whatnot. Now, maybe it's because it was The Voice and maybe it was on video, still off to the side, and she was listening. I don't know. Maybe they considered that something different. But that makes sense, right? I mean, if you have 2 people in the car, you're gonna be more alert. My question is, if you have 2 people in the car, are you doing that much better though? I mean, or are you kind of like, if you get into I was like, maybe you just talk and you're doing your job, but maybe you kind of hit on a subject that strikes with both of you. Like, oh, were you at the game last night? I was at the game last night. All of a sudden, like, you get very engaged, and all it takes is a quick second for something to happen. So how much does even 2 people do? To me, live testing in cities is a joke. And the fact they've put this person through this is just crazy. So anyway, they removed it. And solo operators were often looping the same monotonous routes on hour-long shifts. Left to self-police their usage of cell phones, Uber forbade operators from using handsets while driving. So this is where they're saying, like, you couldn't touch it, but you could have music playing and stuff. but also had operators keep the phones handy in the car in order to get company Slack messages. So several other operators had been fired or quit for violating phone policy before the 2018 crash. Vasquez's claim was that she was monitoring Slack on her work phone, came in legal filings long after the NTSB published its report, which named her distraction as the probable cause of the crash. Vasquez's attorney contended Vasquez was only listening to the voice as operators were allowed to do, and argue that the investigators mixed up which phone Vasquez was looking at in the seconds leading up to the fatality. As defense attorney Matt Morrison said in court, she was not watching the voice. This is a quote. She was not watching the voice, Your Honor. She was doing what she was asked to by Uber, and that is to monitor the systems in the car. Nonetheless, Judge, she's indicated that the conduct itself was reckless. She acknowledged that here today, and she's accepting responsibility for that. Now, I would counter that with, that it was reckless for her to be monitored. Okay, so let's assume that she didn't have a phone for just a second. And isn't it reckless to even be looking at the phone from Uber that has Slack? To me, it is. I mean, we all drive. I'm sure we've all been guilty of sending a text at a light or something, and everything's misspelled, and it's more worth it to wait to where you get to going. We all know we shouldn't do it anyway, but it's better to wait to where you're going, because a lot of times people are like, "What is this?" And you look at it and you spelled everything wrong because you just tried to do it so quick. So I would say stay hands-free, stay voice text, or, stay on speakerphone if you need to do that. But, let's see. Where I'm looking for the alleged problems with Uber's self-driving car program were serious enough that a former operations manager of the self-driving truck division of Uber, Robbie Miller, had written a whistleblower email to higher-ups in the days before the fatality, the fatal Arizona crash, warning about the car division's poor safety record and practices. So this, again, we had a whistleblower within there. So, there's a bunch of quotes. There was people that were hoping that she was going to fight it, but she had too much on the line. I will tell you that, 4 to 8 years potentially, had they found her guilty. Now, I don't think they would have. I think that any jury trial would have been like, no, this is on the company. Sorry. I would have, and I shouldn't be saying that before I hear both sides. And I would probably be rejected from being on the jury, but everybody would be in my book, because I feel like they'd all hear it and be like, no, dude, not even close. The company's responsible. But regardless, she had to plead guilty. Vasquez's guilty plea lands during a summer of worry over dangers of AI in California that has become the site of a battle over whether Cruise and Waymo and their self-driving taxis, robotaxis, can charge for full-time service to the public. But that's not the biggest issue. San Francisco officials have been arguing for a long time that the tech is not safe or ready. Even the fire department, the police department, the mayor of San Francisco all say, get your cars out of here. So if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's not like even that city's not down with it. That was a state decision that was made. And yes, San Francisco gets I'm sure they get some funding for letting it or for having it there, but it's like, hey, we're going to test these cars here, and we'll get you this much money. And the state of San Francisco was basically like, we're good. We don't want those cars here. We would, it's always nice to get money, but we're good. You keep those cars, put them somewhere else. And then the state overrode them and said, no, we're going to put them here. So very weird. But yeah. So this is a big hit to the self-driving thing. There's a lot. If you go to ridesharerodeo.com, it was like 3 days ago I posted it. You can't miss it. It says Uber 2018 fatal crash fatality. Go in there. There's a lot of there's 3 articles, and there are 3 good ones with great information, and you can check out exactly what happened here. And a lot of the testimonials and stuff. That's what I was trying. I was scrolling through screens. That's why I was getting a little, because normally I just, I read 4 or 5 articles on a story, and then I kind of work off one with my notes next to it. But on this one, I was working off 3 different stories. So there was a little pause there. But there's a lot more to read into this. It is finally solved, and she just has 3 years of probation. And when I say just, I shouldn't say just, because she's had 5 years of dealing with lawyers that she can't afford. Now 3 years of probation without jail. To me, this was I just this was the fault of the Uber technology. And for any of us who have done rideshare or food delivery or Connect or I really not sure where the corner shop integration is at this point, but shopping through Uber. And I say that because I know where it is, but it's been moving. It's a moving target. They brought it on. It was big in some areas, and then it died off, and now it's not in so many areas. But I know they're about to really come out on Uber Eats and crush it. But for those of us that have worked that, this is not a company that, look, we know that they don't tell you much. When you onboard, when you have questions, it's hard to get a human. So my question becomes, because she wasn't an employee, or they would have been very concerned and made sure she was trained, how trained was she for this? Because it's one thing to go do food delivery or rideshare. It takes a certain person to even be able to say, I can do rideshare. And it's usually somebody that's been in the service industry and feels comfortable around strangers and stuff, because let's face it, things happen, but things happen everywhere. So, I mean, it's not so much about the things happen. It's about the knowing how to read people, how to read a situation. And it takes a certain person to do this. But for the sitting in the robo-taxi side, I would think there'd be tremendous understanding needed, even though she's not the engineer. And I'm not saying she needs to go get an engineering degree to do this, but she should have a decent overview of what that looks like. Okay, so check that out. You guys might want to look at that. It just kind of speaks volumes about the Uber, the environment they create and the culture that they've cultivated. So I don't know. I think that that it's a big story. I've been following it for years. I found this to be an interesting ending to it, and I really think it's time that we need to stop talking about so much autonomous on the roundtables and stuff, and it's time for the companies to very much start talking about autonomous, because and where and how it should be performed. Real quick story here. I don't know if you guys saw, but Instacart has just slashed pay for drivers. It took I don't know if you guys remember, in my market, minimum dropped to 8 before most markets. And when most people were like, no, eight's not the minimum. And I'm like, I see 8. And this was a while ago. But now the minimum that is nationally accepted is 7. We all acknowledge that it can be a $7 order, but Instacart has slashed that from $7 to $4, making it almost completely tip reliant based. I, being from the service industry, am used to completely tip reliant based. So for those of you that haven't worked in the service industry, there's a little comparison here that I want to give you guys. So again, this is to a lot of newbies, and maybe to even some of you veterans that listen to the podcast, because I haven't talked about this in a while. But for those that don't know this, like if you're a bartender here in Denver, minimum wage is, way up there, let's say. Okay. It's it's whatever it is. in each state. I want to be very careful about how I talk about this because it applies to all markets. Even the part about the bartenders, it might be a little different, but here in Denver, you get paid. Is it three? I don't know. It's been a while since I was in it, but it was like 3.35 an hour for a server and $2.13 an hour as a bartender. So if you're thinking, man, that's not minimum wage, that's see, this is why I talk about hybrids type stuff, because this is proof it can be done. That is to make sure that people are paying their taxes on the tips they're claiming. And I mean, basically, it's not even about that pay, is what I'm saying. Like, it's not like I'm going to take that job for $2.13 an hour, and I know I'll get some tips, but man, that $2.13 an hour is really going to come in handy. Because here's the thing: if you're working at a bar and you're making really good money, you should, every 2 weeks, you should be getting a check that says $0. Now, they still have to give you the stub at the location, but a $0 check means you crushed it, because it means your credit card tips and cash declared tips were so high that it took your paycheck down to zero because they used the tips against it. The way it works, basically, if you work at Applebee's, you probably get that check, and if you work 10 hours, you get whatever tips you get during that 10 hours, and because it doesn't outweigh it, you probably get $21.30 in a paycheck too. So my point is, that's kind of nothing in the big picture. Like when I was bartending, $200 to $300 a night for a 5 to 6 hour shift of busting my hump was kind of common on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then even to do pretty well on any given night with tips. But, I know people who worked at an Applebee's about a mile and a half from the bar I worked at, which was in Lodo, which was in a fun part of town. And those Applebee's ones, they might make $50 on the weekends or $100 tops, but on a weekday or a week evening, it's like, 25 to 75 in tips. It's just night and day. And I kind of compare that to Instacart or DoorDash and the way they do things, compared, and Uber and Lyft even, compared to like the apps that I love, like Curry and this and that. Not just because they're last mile space, and I've found a niche there that's working for me, but you make much better money doing work that everybody, first of all, in this case, I think it's oversaturation that drives that. So I think that because of oversaturation, and for whatever reason, a lot of people, I mean, now I get a lot more people, but 2 years ago when I was telling people about Curry, get on it, I had my link. If you clicked that link, you were activated in about a day. Now there's a huge waiting list in almost every city. And I'm unless you have not heard of Curry, CURRI.com. Unless you have not heard of Curry, this might be new to you, but, I mean, they're transparent. They pay better. It's last mile courier services of packages and things, and not from a Uber Connect perspective. Or I don't know if DoorDash still does it too, but where DoorDash was letting you do customer to business or customer to customer. I mean, to me, it was like Uber Connect and DoorDash, whatever they were calling that. I don't even know if that's even in beta in some areas anymore. They might have just pulled the plug on the DoorDash one, but they were doing it, DoorDash deliveries. So that and Uber Connect was basically just Uber and DoorDash drug dealer to me, because you could just send, even if you need something to go to the post office, the driver was going in, their plate was on the videotape at the post office or the UPS store or whatever. So, I mean, could there be some backtracking? Yeah, but good luck, because you know what? As we know, you can't get any information. The police can't get information out of Uber until the lawyers are involved. So like, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but when there's been like, when there's violent attacks or drivers or passengers have been killed by one another or whatever, those investigations, if one has happened in your area and you feel comfortable, go ask a police officer next time you see one, if they know anything about it. Cause usually they do, like here in Denver, they do. And they just are livid, the police at these app companies, because of data privacy rules and laws. And I'm all for them, but they should be helping us at the times we need the help. Like, don't let my bank account get hacked. Let me, don't sell my data. Don't data mine me. Don't take my email and my other stuff. And in the terms of service, I clicked a box on says that you can sell it to all these companies. That's the kind of stuff that I really care about. Like, if somebody gets killed in an accident, I don't want Uber going, hold on, let us get the attorneys on the phone before we get you any information. Because that's all time-sensitive stuff, and that should be gotten to them immediately. And Uber, Lyft, you guys know it. You know it. I mean, and now that there's been some more violence in the delivery space too, you guys know it too. DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats is still Uber, I guess, and even all the ones Takeaway and all the ones over in the UK and stuff. You guys all know it. You all know it. Like, be careful with our data. Don't resell it. And when the police need it to catch somebody that kills somebody, and it's very time sensitive, I'm sure there's a way your lawyers can default work with that, saying, hey, listen, in situations like these, let's just get the information to the police. Because, I mean, look, I don't know. Don't even get me started, because I'm opening I always try and, I have a seal, and then I seal it, and then I seal it, and then I duct tape it, is my can of Uber morality. But every once in a while on this podcast, I like opening it up just a little bit. But sometimes when I open it, the cap flies off and I can't find it. And then we spin out of control. So, but back to the Instacart thing. $7 to $4. So I look, I know you guys, some of you guys rip it on Instacart. Not as many as used to, and some markets are way better than others. I talked to a lot of drivers, and I know I talked to some who are like, you're crazy to say Instacart sucks because it doesn't suck. Well, that's why I'm always careful. In my market, Instacart sucks. And anybody I've asked in this market agrees with me. I got to tell you guys, like, when I do live streams and stuff, I have people come in there and say, well, it doesn't suck in my market. In fact, Instacart's the only one I use, and I make this. And these people are not just saying things. Like, some of them I've gotten to know pretty well, and they've emailed me screenshots and through the order stuff. So it's not just, like that enough where I can say, yeah, that really did happen, and you did do that. Where they're doing much better. But here in Denver, it has always sucked. And everybody that I know here in Denver that does gig work, even the people on YouTube and whatnot, other podcasters, we all know about it. It sucks. But nationally now, $7 an order to $4. At $4 an order, I can hustle on the apps I love. I haven't done enough Instacart to probably go head to head with an Instacart person and do better than them in my market. If that's all they do is Instacart, I've only done, if that's your primary thing, you're going to always be better at it. So, but even those people say it sucks. But so those people at best, let's say you get a 70 item, say you need to do a 70 item shop that used to be $7 plus and if there was a tip. And I stress if, because a lot of times it would just be $7. But you have a 60 item shop for $7, and let's say there's an $8 tip. That's going to be $15. A 70 item shop for me to go to the store, to get it all, and to get it delivered. And again, I'm not going to take one that's going to be really far, so it's going to have to be kind of close. But that's going to take me at least an hour. And for $15, I don't want to do that. And that's with an $8 tip. So I use that number because $7 base pay plus $8 tip. That means that the tip is more than the pay Instacart is willing to offer. So they're tipping over 100% of the pay you're accepting from Instacart, even though you're seeing the tip, so you're really accepting as a whole. That's a strong tip, even though it doesn't feel like it. And we all know that on Instacart, when you're doing a lot of shopping, tips should be different. But so $7 to 15 for an hour's worth of my work, I'm never even going to do that. But now you've moved it down to 4, and at a time when people are tipping even less, and even on Instacart, people are tip baiting. So now let's say that and again, guys, in my market, no joke, 70%, well, not, let me just be very safe because I know this is absolutely right. 50% of the orders I see in my market don't have any tip. So they were coming through just at 7. Now, some weren't 60 items. They might have been 40, 45. Some might have been 110. So, but in those cases where there's no tip, it just said $8 or $7. How many of those did I take? 0. But now the no tip ones are going to come through and say 4. I really need to know who is going to take a $4 no tip Instacart order, go do somebody's shop, use your car, drive to the store, do the shop, drive to the house, and drop off for $4. It's going to what could take you 60 to 80 minutes plus. Honestly, I mean, to me, if that's where you're at, you need a new plan. I'm not saying you even need to figure out a way to tweak out the app. You need a new plan. Hopefully, you're multi-apping and you just don't count on Instacart. If it's like that in your market, like it is in mine. I mean, I don't even turn it on all the time anymore because I just know it just doesn't ever change. But this is a horrible update, and I don't really know what else to say about it. Excuse me, guys. I have a bit of a cough here. So DoorDash is testing out AI chatbot technology. I got to tell you guys this. To me, like it's kind of I find it odd because what the chatbot technology is in the DoorDash app is going to be on the shopper side or on the, delivery side. So it's going to be on the side of us working it. But the feature is called Dash AI. Dash AI allows shoppers to ask questions and receive restaurant recommendations. So like, what to replace. I'm sure eventually it'll get to the customer side too, where they can ask for recommendations and they'll base it on past orders you've made and things like that in the algorithm. But for the drivers, I have a big concern about this. That a lot of this tech is so in its infancy that it has problems all the time. But B, what if these restaurant recommendations in the beginning of Dash AI, which is artificial intelligence learning, so clearly it's Dash AI learning beta mode, and in that case, I would say, are you going to piss some customers off? Because I feel like you might get the wrong thing, or I don't know. We'll see how it works. The main reason I wanted to just bring it up is because it came on my radar because it's just going into testing, and it's going to hit beta here into, I think it's 7 markets. But I always like to stay ahead of the game. And so I dug this up, found it, and, we at least needed to put it out there. But what I did want to mention, because I found it came at a very weird time. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but recently there was a Chat GPT integration made into the suicide prevention line. And I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this. It was completely AI and Chat GPT. So because they've laid off so many people, or they don't have the volunteers they used to and whatnot, and we just see the world moving into a technology phase. This was such a bomb fail. Even though it's a little outside of the gig economy, I need to mention it to you guys. If you are aware, bear with me. If you are aware, or if you are aware, bear with me. If you're not aware, here's how it goes. So, the suicide prevention line had decided that let people type into Chat GPT, and that way it can keep having conversation with them in their way, and it'll learn. It got shut down and is under federal investigation right now because the AI was in the scene behind the scenes running so that it was learning from all these conversations. And there was one conversation that went on for, I can't remember what it was. It was over 2 hours. It wasn't 3. But just so in case you guys aren't aware, that's fairly common on from what I saw on the comparisons. That seems like it's a fairly common amount of time to be on the suicide prevention hotline. So like even before all this, if you called an agent, that's why they're there. A lot of times you are on the phone with them for that long. But this one was getting back. It started getting back this person started getting back a lot of the same answers. And I'm not kidding, guys. If you haven't heard this story, at a point, obviously the person's in major distress when you're at this point. It was using Chat GPT. Obviously they were finding some value in it, but then it started getting back kind of the same answers. And it's like, what? It kept asking a certain question in a different way, but everybody that reviewed this knew it was the same question. It ended up that the AI, between AI and Chat GPT, that it actually sent her back a message to kill herself. Maybe you should just kill yourself. And that is something that I don't even know how to tell you guys how I feel about that. I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, are feeling exactly what I'm feeling right now. It's just pure disgust. It proves my point. It's like it's like the autonomous cars. They don't work, so they don't belong on the public roads. Okay, well, this is even bigger. This is a suicide prevention hotline, and a lot of these people who work it are trained. But you just literally proved every point of everybody who doubts AI. Somebody killed themselves because the artificial intelligence kind of is the supervisor of the Chat GPT in that scenario. And what it was, hey, that this person's not asking any questions. Move to the next one, kind of thing, like, and it was almost like, okay, maybe you should kill yourself. Next. I think we all know that's not how this is done. Okay, guys. Real quick here, we're running out of time. There are 2 new cities with 2 new rideshare companies. And don't get too excited yet, but get excited if you live there. Try them out. Please try them out, because if they're good, keep using them. Let's stay local. Let's give these guys let's give Uber and Lyft some competition here. But Kansas City has Iris. You guys can look into that. I will put the article, since we're running out of time, the article to this in the show notes, and the article to the next one, which is Miami has a new rideshare app. The difference, the Iris one in Kansas City is just going to compete, which is great. Hopefully they'll do better than some of the other smaller ones that have launched have fared against the giants. However, the Miami newest rideshare app lets you name your own price. Does that sound familiar to anybody? I don't know if to you new listeners know, but to you veterans of the podcast, and maybe you've seen some YouTube stuff, 2 times I've had Ruby Perez, and I got to tell you, the CEO and founder of FreeCab, FURE.CAB, he says it free cab. It sounds exactly like that. And Uber's about to be doing some stuff like that with advertising. And long story short is, I knew about this over a year ago from him, and I was trying to figure out how he's going to get this off the ground. Now we have Uber looking into it, and there's one launched in Miami. Again, guys, the Miami and the Iris article will be in the show notes. So actually this week, I don't always do it because I say go find the articles if you want. And this week was a little bit different of a podcast, but I usually say go find everything at ridesharerodeo.com. This week, I'm just going to, anything that we talked about, I'm going to put into the show notes, the links. You guys can go check them out because I think they're all stories you guys should read. And Descend on Denver, GigCon on Friday. town hall on Saturday. And it's going to be, if you want the details, again, the link will be in the show notes. And you guys, if you're going to be within 150 miles of Denver, 200 miles, I'd even say it's worth the drive to come in and be here in person to see this. It's a first of its kind experience. That's it, you guys. Please, please, please be safe out there. Be aware. And more than yourself, be extra aware of other people, because we are all going under some major heat spells right now. And that makes everybody a little more tired, not paying as good of attention. So let's have us gig drivers be the ones out there really sharp and on top of our game. Because we all know often accidents happen, but a lot of times it's not your fault. So be extra aware of what's going on. Be safe, earn smart, and we'll see you back here next week on the Rideshare Rodeo audio podcast. Until then, peace.
Driving